All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to take two of the simplest, most common words in your vocabulary, yes and no. And we're going to peel back the layers. Because hiding underneath is this surprisingly powerful engine that, well, it pretty much drives all of human conversation. So let's dive in and find out what's really going on when we say yes or no.
I mean, think about it for a second. Are yes and no just, passive answers to questions? Or is there something way more fundamental happening every single time you use them? This is the big question we're digging into today. This idea that these two tiny words are actually powerful actions that literally build our shared reality. So, to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to start with a concept from linguistics called speech acts. And the basic idea is super simple. When we speak, we aren't just making sounds, we're actually doing things.
A speech act is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's an action you perform just by speaking. When you say, I promise, you're not just describing a promise, you are actively making one right then and there. Same thing when you say, I apologize. You're performing the act of apology. The words themselves have a real force, a real effect in the world.
And that brings us right back to our main topic. In this whole framework, saying yes is the speech act of affirmation, and, you guessed it, saying no is the speech act of denial. They're not just simple responses, they're two of the most primary, most fundamental actions we can possibly perform with language.
What's really fascinating is just how central these two acts are. You've got entire fields like question-answer semantics, which is basically the formal study of how conversations actually work, and they see affirmation and denial as the absolute core of everything. They're the essential building blocks. The main point here is if you really want to understand the mechanics of any dialogue, you have to start by treating yes and no as fundamental actions. Okay, so let's build on that because this is where things get really, really interesting. We're going to zoom in on the word no because it turns out that treating it like an action solves some major puzzles in how we understand language.
So here's the puzzle for linguists. Negation is everywhere, and it's complicated. Think about it. It is not raining. I am unhappy. No one is here. Trying to come up with one single logical rule that covers all of those gets really messy really fast. But here's the key. What if we stop thinking about the logic first? What if, instead, we start with the simple, primary act of denial, the act of saying no? All of a sudden, we have this one single foundation that can explain all those different forms of negation. It's the solution.
And this powerful idea actually has a name. It's called rejectivism, and it totally flips our usual thinking on its head. See, we tend to think that the abstract, logical concept of not comes first, and the word no is just how we express it. Rejectivism says, nope, it's the other way around. The basic human action of denying something, of rejecting it, that's what's fundamental. The formal logic comes later.
Now, to get just a little more specific, the act of denial is what's called an illocutionary act. It's a fancy term, I know, but all it really means is that the act's purpose is to have a direct effect on the conversation itself. So when you say no to a statement like, the sky is green, you are performing an action. You're trying to rule that statement out, to literally remove it from the pool of things you both agreed are true.
And this quote just nails it. It really hammers home the core idea. The raw, human act of denying something came first. It's the origin point. Our entire complex system of logical negation, all those nots and uns and nons, it all grew out of this simple, powerful act of rejection. Okay, so we've established that yes and no are these foundational actions. So now let's zoom out a bit and see how these two simple acts actually structure the entire flow and evolution of a conversation. So both affirmation, which is a type of assertion, and denial are acts that make a claim about the world. And every single time one is used, it's an attempt to update what we call the shared context of the conversation. Just think of this shared context as the common ground, right? It's the set of facts and beliefs that you and the other person both accept as true. Saying yes adds to that common ground. Saying no blocks something from being added. It's a constant negotiation. And this isn't just some vague idea, by the way. It's being formalized in some really cutting-edge theories. In something called dynamic semantics, a conversation is literally modeled as this constant process of updating that shared context, and it's driven entirely by these acts of assertion and rejection. There's another framework, meaning as use, that goes even further. It argues that the very meaning of logic itself is defined by the rules from when we can accept or reject statements.
So we've done this quick dive into speech acts, rejectionism, and the flow of conversation. But what's the big picture here? Why does seeing yes and no in this completely new light actually matter?
Okay, here are the crucial points to walk away with. First, yes and no are actions. They actively build and shape and police the shared reality that you create anytime you talk to someone. Second, the act of denial is incredibly powerful. It's the very bedrock that gives meaning to all other forms of negation. And finally, these two simple acts are the fundamental push and pull, kind of like the binary code that underlies the entire complex structure of all human dialogue.
So I'll leave you with this to chew on. If saying no, the act of denial, is just as fundamental in action as saying yes, what does that change about how we think about disagreement? Maybe it suggests that disagreement isn't some kind of failure of logic, but a primary, essential action in how we build understanding together. Definitely something to think about the next time you're in a conversation. Thanks for tuning in.